So, introductions. We're going to do my introduction real quickly, just as background. Some of you know me for a variety of different phases in my life, and I love you all, and I love that you're here, so thank you so much. My own publishing story, I have been on every piece of the journey. So I've been the TV producer who used to book the authors on television. Then I was an author who got a literary agent, so I went through that process. Curtis Brown in New York City has been my literary agency. So I did the whole book proposal, which took 2 years. Then I did all the book blurb query letters to get a publisher. So I've been through that process, so I understand it really well. And then in 2008, we started a publishing company as a default to the fact that we were promoting experts and authors on television, and we couldn't get their books published fast enough in terms of marketing timeline. We took our business plan to the distributors to basically said, we can market authors. Can you help us get distribution deals going? So we work with big distributors, and we can get books on bookstore bookshelves within 6 to 9 months nationwide. I'm very impressed with, because we move faster in a smaller capacity than some of the bigger houses, which I'll tell you a little bit more about. So, and we've hit the New York Times. We've been publishing books for 10 years. We've hit the New York Times. Barnes & Noble carries at least 1 to 3 books of every one of our titles in all of their stores across the country, and we work with 4,000 independent retailers. So I'm really proud of that and happy to share that information with you as you think about moving forward with your own book. So what makes a book? So the way I approach a book is like I do any project, any creative project, whether it's a television show or whether it's an expert's marketing background or a marketing project. I approach a book like, what is the project? So what makes a book? I can tell you that words on a paper does not make a book. However, without words on a paper, you do not have a book. So this is where people get stuck. They get stuck starting, and they get stuck with the words. Sometimes I get people with messy manuscripts who just are tangled up in their own words. So those are the 2 places people get stuck. We're going to address them both today and through the next couple of weeks. In our world, in the publishing here, at least at TVGuestpert, we speak the language of word count, not page count, because page count is arbitrary. Did you double space? Did you single space? Did you use a large font? Did you not use a large font? What are your margins? So we speak in word count. So when we talk about word count, we do words in 40 to 60,000 words is our sweet spot for our books. 75,000 is a fat book for us. It's kind of on the heavy side. And when you're looking at your document, your Word document, the word count's in the bottom left-hand corner. We publish in paperback trade. I'm not a big fan of hard copy because the return on the cost isn't as much, especially if you're going to be self-publishing it. If you've got a real large publishing company and they're doing it. But I think with paperback trades is the best value for the dollar. But we're looking at 40 to 60,000 words. It should be I think the goal on that. For manuscripts, we receive all sorts of manuscripts in all various forms of dress, basically. So we look at all sorts of projects, from ideas to very, very thick missives of book content. So manuscripts that don't work, and so I'm sharing this with you up front in terms of how to approach your own project. Transcriptions of workshops, seminars, and events is a way that people will try to acquire or aggregate their own content, especially as an expert. This usually requires a tremendous amount of editing on the back end. So even though you're just transcribing a seminar that you've done or a workshop that you've done, the back end of editing sometimes is more untangling than if you just started with the writing process. Also, a transcript, spoken language, on paper does not translate actually to the same as the written word. So not poo-pooing this way of, literally it's not pooping, but it's not poo-pooing. Did you catch that? Yeah. This as because I did this with my book Get on TV. Some of you took my seminars, and so you remember the old days of Get on TV. And so I literally did do that for my own first book. What I ended up doing was boiling it down to the big speaking points and then writing it from there. But the editing process is really long. So this isn't the best way to do it. Just know that. Like, people will turn over literally to us 75,000 words of a transcript, and it has to be rewritten because it's lost the whole narrative. The next one is journal. This is another form of manuscript that we receive, especially travel journals. People want to write travel books, and then they hand us like 6 years of a travel journal. And again, there's like no story in it, there's no purpose in it, there's no narrative, and there's no, it's just it's really another, unless you want to read someone's private journal. And, we're always asked, do we want an Eat, Pray, Love type book by, Elizabeth Gilbert didn't write an Eat, Pray, Love travel book. It's not a travel journal. She actually wrote a love story. It's a 3-act love story in Eat, Pray, Love. It's not a journal. So another way not to approach a book. The other one that we receive is 99% of autobiographies, I will say, are not books either, especially the ones that start with where your parents met and where you were born, which is the most difficult part of creating a legacy book. And I'm so glad that you appreciate that. And that has, I got to tell you that we receive a lot of books. And I understand, but here's the thing. I champion you and I champion experts to tell their story. But it has to be like in a structured narrative way and not just, I was born in Paterson, New Jersey, because frankly nobody really cares where I was born. So the next thing is volume writing. The reason the above 3 forms of volume writing is what I'm saying is that they really, it's just putting together a lot of words on a paper, and it's not really a strategic approach to constructing a book. That's why I point those 3 ways of doing a manuscript out as not effective in approaching your book. It's much easier than you think it is. First question, who is the reader? Judy, and I know you will appreciate that, because who is the reader? Because from television we're asked who is the audience. So who is the reader is the first question we want to know when someone's writing a book, is who is specifically we're going to be doing that. In television they say who is your audience. So the first assignment, I'm going to call it creative inspiration, between this week and next week is going to be who specifically is your reader. And I want to give you a couple considerations for that before we go forward. Metadata. I'm going to just touch on this basically here for a second. Metadata is the way they categorize books on bookstore bookshelves. And this is also be the trick for self-publishing, so flag this conversation in metadata for me if we get into the self-publishing piece, because metadata is the way books are tagged. So who the audience is, who the reader of the book is going to be metadata tagged through this system called the BISAP code. In publishing, books are defined by metadata, and it's a series of coding that determines where a book gets placed on a bookstore shelf. There are some 4,000 BISAP codes. So your reader is defined by 4,000 aspects. So when a potential client author comes to us at TVGuestpert Publishing and says, I want to write a women's empowerment book, I giggle and think, well, can you be more specific about that? And the reason is they are categories like this, and I pulled this specifically for Sheila. So when we're looking at categorizing a book here, psychology books, this is how we determine where a psychology book gets placed on a bookstore bookshelf. People who do self-publishing have the double challenge of getting their books meta-tagged because when you put it on Amazon, it's really just a place, on a self-publishing place. In the bookstore, this is a physical reality, but this is how it's categorized. So when we're looking at who is your reader, who do you want to read your book, this is the kind of how specific that we're getting in terms of your reader. So between this week and next week, really consider who do you want to read your book. I know everybody will say to me they want everybody to read their book, and I agree with that. But even Elizabeth Gilbert's Eat, Pray, Love, that was a female audience. So she didn't get everybody in her very successful book to read her book, but she got a female audience. So just consider that. And then moving forward with this is the bookstore bookshelf space. That's the highest real estate in bookstore bookshelves, and that's our book right there at the NYU bookstore. I'm very, very proud of right there. So here's what I have to say, answer to the distribution and publishing. A book lives or dies by where it gets placed on the bookstore bookshelf. So who is your reader? Be very specific about who you want to read your audience. What is the takeaway from the book? Really, really important question. Like, we read manuscripts all the time, and we're like, okay, well, what did the author want? Really, what did they want us to know from that? Did they want us to know that they had a really great time traveling the world? Did they want us to have a lesson? There was something we were supposed to learn from it? Are we going to be inspired? Are we going to be entertained? Or what's the emotional tone of the book? And I'm even speaking from an expert's perspective. I'm talking about fiction books. I'm talking about the nonfiction expert-related book. So who is your reader and what do you want to take away from that is really something to consider. Getting specific to that is we have a current book getting ready to be published on May 9th, and it's called The Psychiatrist's Guide to Helping Parents Reach Their Depressed Tweens. Very specific. It's helping parents reach their depressed tweens, not children and not teenagers. It was almost depressed and anxious, but we went with depressed. So it's a very, very specific book. The reader for the parents of tweens that suffer. They have anxiety and depression. We hit depression because we felt that anxiety in the title wasn't identifiable. What are they supposed to walk away with? They're supposed to understand the mental illness of anxiety and depression and mostly how to reach and communicate with their child who suffers from possible anxiety and depression at this age group that goes undiagnosed. So it's very, very specific. If you've been to one of our on-camera training classes, you'll know that we talk about contextualizing your opening sound bite of your media appearance to contextualize your expertise. So an example of that I always give, it would be like, so Jacquie Jordan's the author of Get on TV, and I would say on my opening speaking point, you know, I wrote the book Get on TV. When I saw the cover of the book, I thought, was it representative of what I wanted to put out there? And as someone who's a behind-the-scenes person and a media coach, I wanted to make sure that I was representing both sides of the camera as I wrote the book Get on TV. So it's kind of like subtly contextualizing your expertise. So one of the formulas that we do here in architecting the book is to give the information that you want to, the take-home information, and then contextualize the experience. So I'm just going to read this from Guyani's book to give you an idea of what I'm talking about here. So Chapter 6, The Identified Patient. Often, when families first come into my office, the child is the identified patient. The child sits on the couch, slumped down with his shoulders and head down, fidgeting, looking at the floor, legs shaking, looking like they want to crawl into a ball. The parents, by comparison, often have a lot of energy. They are leaning forward, sitting on the edge of their seat, ready to tell me all the problems that they have with their child. After we have gone through the evaluation, I explain the dynamic, and the child looks more energetic. He sits up, looks around the room, and has newfound life and energy in his eyes. When I look over at the parents, they are often slumped in the chair and look a little heavier and solemn at this point. While the energy shifts in the room, the goal of treatment remains to find balance for everyone in the family, and this is possible. A balanced family dynamic happens when there's no need for any member of the family to take on the tension of another. In these families, there are no identified patients. As families draw upon the courage to face painful issues and work together to solve them, the family becomes more cohesive and harmonious. Finding this balance and harmony is possible no matter how challenging things might seem today. Ethan, an 8-year-old diagnosed boy with ADHD, came to me for therapy. He was taking a stimulant medication, and his parents didn't want me to change his prescription. They simply wanted him to do therapy. When I evaluated Ethan, I agreed that he might have ADHD, but I also believed he may have an anxiety disorder. At school, he was disruptive, rough with the other kids, and oppositional with the teacher. He had a difficult time completing his task at school, and at home, he was argumentative with his parents and unable to complete his homework assignments or get ready for school in the morning. So what we did, and this is, I read this to you in written form specifically, is we took the concept, she's setting up what an identified patient is, and then she's moving into a contextualized, basically a case study. So it's the take-home information and then contextualizing the expertise. So that rhythm is a really good dynamic to look at in the construction of the book writing process. So creative inspiration for next week is going to be to define who is your reader. Write a summary of how you want your reader to be, like who's the type of people that you want to have inspired and excited and who would benefit from your book. So that's going to be the first piece. And then the next one is going to be on what shelf in the bookstore would you find your book. So if you have time between this week and next week's call, and you actually have a real bookstore left near you, take a time and meander through the bookstore and just kind of identify where the book would be placed in the bookstore bookshelf, in which shelf your reader would find you. Of course, we want the front entrance bookstore bookshelves, but just so you know, all of those are highly bought and paid for book space. The rest of the bookstore is placed basically by reader and category. The other creative inspiration for next week is going to be the intention for writing your book. So it will be your own personal why for doing it. This obviously won't go in the book, but it will be part of your book writing process. And I want to help you frame the book project as well as I want to help you write the book project. So doing the intent is something that is like when you're knee deep into it, or you have the book, or you're buried in the book already and you're knee deep into it. The intention helps us undig ourselves out of it sometimes when we're like knee deep in words. So that will be the other intention for next week. And then you can do this digitally, or you can do this in a 3-ring binder. You're a 3D person like myself who still prefers to handwrite checks. I'm very tactile. That's why I like books. I'm not a Nook or Kindle person, but you could be a digital person. But if you can set up a binder, a 3-ring binder that is devoted to the project, so it's not the book itself, but it's going to be the writing such as your intention or your purpose for your book, maybe clippings, or I would pull in and collect little clippings and essays and just collage it into 3-ring binders so that when I was going through the book, it was either things that I would jump off of and say, oh yeah, I need to, pull this into the book as I'm writing it. And I would use that as, so the 3-ring binder just to put the elements that won't necessarily go into the book but are going to support the architecture of the book. And then, of course, if you just do this digitally and you're one of those people who just put it into a folder, then create that folder. But there's a lot of stuff that goes about a book but not into the book. And a lot of people don't approach the book that way, and it will help you in the long run. So let's talk about the book. The picture real quickly is we launched our New York Times bestselling book, The Art of Having It All, 2 years ago on Valentine's Day. We did a backstage press junket at the Writers Guild Awards. So that was really impressive. And so we were giving the book to Bob Saget there, who I got to produce for television. So we had a moment there. It was a great, great moment. So the book writing phase fits into 2 parts, the writing and the editing. And let me tell you about that here for a second. The writing part is that there should be very little editing in the actual writing process. Just get it down on paper. So I'm not a big believer of writing and then rewriting. Just write. Let it go out. Let it go out and have no judgment about what is being written. Trust the process. Write. Don't rewrite. Really allow the book to write itself. You saw the glamour shot at the Writers Guild Awards when we launched the New York Times bestselling book, but this is the unglamorous shot of what the editing process looks like for me. This is like in the middle of the night outside my bedroom floor. That's what the editing process is like, and it's a whole different process than writing the book. It's not the same thing. Many of the manuscripts that we receive haven't been edited and need maybe twice as much editing time as they actually had written time. So I'm a big believer in the writing process. Don't edit it. Allow it to come out, because if you have nothing and it's written words not on paper, nothing's going to happen. But the editing part is about editing, restructuring, rewriting, and copy editing. And you can't get there until you're actually there. So there's some tricks to editing if you need to edit. And then, Judy, for you, this is very much going to be about approaching it like a TV show. What are your segment acts? We call them chapters in books. What are your segment breaks? What is your lead-in? What is your tease out? What is your segment break? We call it chapters. What's coming up next in the book? Same exact architecture for the editing process. So that's how to approach the editing. But when you're just starting to get the book down, just write. Write. And what happens when you're actually in the writing process is you start to look at word count and you're like, wow, I've got 5,000 words. Then you're like, I got 25,000 words. And then, of course, you know that 40,000 is the minimum, So when you hit 40,000, you're like, I got a book. I always suggest overwriting beyond 40,000 words, because in the editing process, you will probably lose 15% of the book, 15 to 20% of the book.
Right.
So just keep that in mind. So people who stop at 39,000 and think they've got a book, it ends up probably being about 25,000 words when you get down to the editing, because it's just natural in the writing process to repeat yourself or restate things or re-angle it from, 8 stories, but you've already told it from 13 stories, or sometimes you say in a paragraph what needs to be said only in one sentence. So, but writing, go for it without judgment and without restrictions. So allow the book to write itself if you're starting your book. Make notes. I know that in my books, once I start activating the writing process, I would be sleeping at night and I would get an idea in the middle of the night and I was too tired to write it, and so I would sleep with a Post-it and I would write the idea in the dark on the Post-it note and just slap it on the bedboard. And then in the next morning, I would pull like 6 Post-its off and then go stick it in my 3-ring binder, bum, 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 bum. And then when I had my writing time, I would write that in. Because, you know, it's the bed in the middle of the night or it's the shower where the ideas come in. And so it was 2 inconvenient places to actually write your book. So, but putting your ideas to paper, they don't need to be flushed out at the time. Just make notes, get it down. Allow it to be a germinating process when you're writing. Editing is different. Misconceptions here is a lot of people think that if they're going to start to write a book, that they're going to sit down and say, in the beginning, and that they're going to write the book from beginning to end. And it's never really that way. I mean, if some people can download a book from beginning to end, that's amazing, but it usually doesn't do that. I bring up our current book, A Psychiatrist's Guide. And when we had the dirty manuscript last summer, it was the book, when we read it for editing, did not start until chapter 8. So we could just tell, because we used one of our company ghostwriters to write it with our author. All the data was there, but they didn't warm up until what the book was until chapter 8. So through chapter 8 through chapter 11, there were 16 chapters in the original manuscript. We literally took the chapter 8 through 11, moved it to chapter 1, and then what they had is the original chapter 1 through 8, we moved to the back of the book. So order is not necessarily important when you're starting your book. Just start the writing process, get it down. Also, with another book we did, Father the Blob, the original chapter 10 became chapter 1. We wanted to lead, just like we approach books and movies, we wanted to lead with the lead, which was Father the Blob. It was the producer is the author. Producer of the movie, Father the Blob, is the author of the book. So we wanted to lead with Steve McQueen dying, because that's the biggest hook about the Blob is Steve McQueen, not necessarily the author. But if you lead with Steve McQueen, then you care about the author. So we had to re-edit and reshuffle that too. Creating successful working timelines, which is something that I wanted to address right away on this call. Don't overcommit your writing time, but once committing to the intention of writing, so just give me 6 weeks here to commit to writing. Just do 10 minutes a day. For starting out, just set the timer down for 10 minutes and do 10 minutes of unobstructed writing. What you'll find is once you get going, you end up doing an hour, but sometimes you can only get 10 minutes out of yourself. But if you do just 10 minutes, and 10 minutes is so easy, it takes 10 minutes to wash the dishes, you will believe that by next week you'll have put an hour's worth of writing in. You'll be surprised how much that actually accumulates. So in this course of next 6 weeks, all you ever did was 10 minutes, 6 to 7 times a week. You'll require 6 hours, which is, could be like 600, words on paper, and it really starts to come together. Or you start to see, oh my God, I've got a head here to a book. And I find once you get started, you start rolling, and it's 10 minutes of not texting, eating, answering the phone, but nothing but writing. I'm a pen to paper person, so believe it or not, I actually write better on a big yellow manuscript, and then I can go back and type it up. I don't know why I'm that way. I'm like very slow that way, but a lot of people can write in your computers. So that's how to get started, and then just put it into your schedule. If you're better in the morning in writing, just do it in the morning. Just commit to it. Just 10 minutes. So it's not a big deal we're asking. And same with the editing. I'll give you some specific notes, Judy, for that when we stop our recording. Traditional publishing. Some of the requirements for traditional publishing still are a literary agent, a book proposal, and a query letter. So in addition to prepping a book, you'll need to track down a literary agent for the book. There's a lot of resources available. I will make a note to make some resources. There's the Publishers Association of Los Angeles here. So if you tap into different groups, you can that will have literary agents available. I'll also share with you the book proposal that I did for Get on TV, sample chapters, and a marketplace competition in it. So we'll get you these materials just to see if you're going to do that. I'm a big believer if you're going to go the traditional publishing, you have to architect the book proposal because it's really like a business plan for the book. And if you're going to go the traditional publishing, you don't need a completed manuscript to sell the book. But you do really need to have like a marketing plan. They're really into what the sale of the book is, to be quite honest. And the other thought along with that is I know that when I sold my first book, I actually created a video of how we were going to do the book. So if you have Shalena, you have a really strong marketing background. If you can, you put that material together, it's really significant in the whole sales process because really that's what they're looking for, which is what they're really looking for. And then the query letter is what happens when you get the agent and they're sending it out to publishers. You just basically send a query letter out from the literary agent to the publisher, and when the publisher is interested, they'll request the book proposal. So that's kind of the structure for getting a traditional publisher involved. The upside is for publishing, traditional publishing, which I love, which is what we do as a company, is that you get nationwide distribution, which is what we also provide here at TVGuestpert Publishing, but that's what you want is nationwide distribution. And people don't realize you're launching a product into the national marketplace, in a very competitive national marketplace. And it's pretty astonishing that when you put something down on paper and then next thing you know, it's all over the place. I mean, we get letters from, a Nashville, Tennessee hairdresser saying that she makes all of her employees read dress code, ending fashion anarchy, before she hires somebody. So you never know where the book touches and reaches, so that's really the reason why I'm a big part of the traditional publishing. Plus the bookstore bookshelves, I think there's nothing more significant than it. So there is a prestigiousness about it that I think is really significant. Downside of traditional publishing is the length of time from idea to bookstore bookshelf. For my personal book, Get on TV, it took 4 years from idea to bookstore bookshelf. At TVGuestpert, what makes us significant is we can get a finished manuscript on the bookstore bookshelves within 6 to 9 months, which is our traditional publishing thing. The other downside of traditional publishing is the profit sharing, but the reach is better. So you give up more profit with a traditional publisher, but you're going to get your book out most likely to more people. The upside of self-publishing is it's self-administered. You have control over it. We're such a small publishing company that we have a lot of collaboration process in our traditional publishing. When I worked with source books on my first book, they were collaborative, but sometimes when you work with a traditional publisher, you just kind of turn over the manuscript and then you just see it when it's on the bookstore bookshelves. But when you do self-publishing, you're the creator, you're the decision maker. It's self-administered process, and you also keep the profits. The downside of it is the challenge of national media coverage with the self-publishing, and for us, because we represent our authors, we represent other people's publishing companies' authors, and we represent self-published authors in our TVGuestpert. But getting national media coverage is difficult. So like when we book on the Today Show, we can't book for a self-published book on the Today Show. Legally, they won't take a self-published book for the reason that it hasn't been vetted. The content hasn't been vetted. So a traditional publisher has obviously vetted the book on some level, and that's one of it. And then the downside of self-publishing is sometimes it's hard to sell your book outside of your own sphere of influence, and that can be challenging. So that is the upside and the downside there with the structure. So we're going to start a reasonable schedule for the 10-minute commitment for next week, even for the editing, which I'll take you offline for in a second. I'm going to talk about who's your reader. We're going to go through that. That will be part of our dialogue next week. And what shelf would you be on in the bookstore bookshelf, and what is the intention for your book, and then your 3D binder or your digital folder. I know they sound like small, tiny little action steps, but it's in the construction of that we actually end up with these books on bookstore bookshelves nationwide. So with that said, I'm going to turn off the recording and open up the call.